Your family canceled your invitation, but keep the $300,000 deposit, the wedding planner said with a cold smile. My heart stopped beating for a moment. I looked at my beautiful daughter Maria standing there in her wedding dress, tears streaming down her face. The wedding was supposed to start in 2 hours, and now this woman was telling us that David's family had pulled out completely but wanted to keep our money? That's when I stood up, looked that wedding planner straight in the eyes, and said something that would change everything forever. But let me tell you how this whole mess started, because you need to understand just how we got to this shocking moment. It all began 6 months ago when my daughter Maria came home with the biggest smile I had ever seen on her face. She was practically glowing as she walked through our front door, and I knew something wonderful had happened. "Mama, Mama," she called out, rushing into our small kitchen where I was making dinner. David proposed. I dropped my wooden spoon right into the pot of soup I was stirring. David Rodriguez was Maria's boyfriend of 3 years, and I had grown to love him like my own son. He was kind, hardworking, and treated my daughter like a princess. But I also knew his family was very wealthy, while we were just regular working people. Oh, my sweet girl. I hugged her so tight I thought I might squeeze the life out of her. "Tell me everything." Maria showed me the most beautiful diamond ring I had ever seen. It sparkled like a tiny star on her finger. She told me how David had taken her to the fancy restaurant downtown, the one with the white tablecloths and candles on every table. He had gotten down on one knee right there in front of everyone and asked her to marry him. "His family is so excited, Mama," Maria said, her eyes shining with happiness. His mother, Mrs. Rodriguez, already has ideas for the wedding. She wants to help plan everything. I felt a little worry creep into my heart, but I pushed it away. This was my daughter's happy moment, and I wasn't going to ruin it with my concerns about money and social differences. Over the next few weeks, David's family did indeed take over the wedding planning. Mrs. Rodriguez, a tall woman with perfectly styled hair and expensive clothes, would come to our house with thick books full of wedding ideas. She talked about flowers that cost more than I made in a month and venues I had only seen in magazines. "Don't worry about the cost, Mrs. Santos," she would tell me with a wave of her hand. "We want this wedding to be perfect for our David and your Maria." At first, I was grateful. Who doesn't want their daughter to have a fairy tale wedding? But as the plans grew bigger and more expensive, I started to feel uncomfortable. The wedding they were planning wasn't something a girl like Maria, from a family like ours, should have. It felt too fancy, too much. "Are you sure about all this?" I asked Maria one evening as we looked through photos of wedding cakes that cost more than our car. "Mama, David's family wants to do this for us," Maria replied. "They say when you love someone, money doesn't matter. They want me to feel like a real princess on my wedding day." I wanted to believe that I really did, but something in my grandmother's heart told me that when rich people say money doesn't matter, there's usually a catch. The wedding plans kept growing. They booked the most expensive hotel in the city. They hired a famous photographer who charged thousands of dollars. They ordered flowers from a special farm that grew roses just for wealthy people's weddings. Everything was first class, top of the line, the very best money could buy. Then came the day that changed everything. Mrs. Rodriguez called me on a Tuesday morning. Her voice sounded different, more serious than usual. "Mrs. Santos, we need to meet today. There's something important we need to discuss about the wedding." My stomach twisted into knots, but I agreed to meet her at the coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, Mrs. Rodriguez was already there, sitting at a corner table with papers spread out in front of her. She looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes as I sat down. "What's this about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She pushed a thick stack of papers toward me. "These are the contracts for everything we've ordered for the wedding. The total cost is $300,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. $300,000? That was more money than I had ever seen in my entire life. That was more than what our house was worth. "I don't understand," I said, my hands shaking as I looked at the papers. "I thought your family was paying for all this." Mrs. Rodriguez finally looked at me, and her expression was cold, nothing like the friendly woman who had been planning my daughter's wedding for months. We never said we were paying for everything, Mrs. Santos. We said we wanted to help plan it. But traditionally, the bride's family pays for the wedding. These contracts all have your signature on them. I looked at the papers more closely, and my heart sank. She was right. Every contract, every agreement, every order had my name signed at the bottom. But I remembered those days differently. Mrs. Rodriguez had always been the one talking to the vendors, making the decisions, telling me where to sign. I had trusted her completely. But I can't afford this, I whispered, feeling tears start to form in my eyes. You know I work at the grocery store. I don't have $300,000. That's not our problem, Mrs. Rodriguez said, her voice getting colder. You sign the contracts. You're legally responsible for all of these costs. The wedding is in 3 days, Mrs. Santos. All the vendors need to be paid in full, or there will be no wedding. I felt like the world was spinning around me. How could I have been so stupid? How could I have let this happen? I thought about Maria, about how excited she was, about how much she loved David. How could I tell her that her wedding was ruined because her mother was too trusting? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator, trying to figure out how I could possibly come up with $300,000. I could sell the house, but that wouldn't be enough. I could take out loans, but no bank would give me that much money with my small income. I could ask my relatives for help, but even if every person I knew gave me all their savings, it still wouldn't be close to enough. The next morning, I called Maria to tell her what had happened. She started crying immediately. Mama, there has to be a mistake, she sobbed. David's family wouldn't do this to us. They love me. They said I was like a daughter to them. I know, sweetheart. But I saw the contracts. I signed them. We're responsible for all the costs. Maria was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, let me talk to David. He'll fix this. His family has the money, and they know we don't. He won't let this happen to our wedding. But David couldn't fix it. When Maria called me back that evening, her voice was flat and empty. David tried to talk to his parents, she said. But they said business is business. They said if we can't afford the wedding we planned, then maybe we're not ready to be married. What does David say about that? I asked. Maria was quiet again. Finally, she whispered. He says maybe his parents are right. Maybe we should wait until we can afford the kind of wedding his family expects. My heart broke for my daughter. This wasn't about money or weddings. This was about David's family showing Maria that she would never be good enough for their son, and sadly, it seemed like David was starting to agree with them. The day before the wedding, I got a call from someone who introduced herself as the wedding planner. I had never spoken to her before. Mrs. Rodriguez had always handled those communications. Mrs. Santos, this is Patricia Williams from Elite Wedding Planning. I need to confirm payment for tomorrow's event. The full amount of $300,000 needs to be transferred to our account by 6 p.m. tonight, or we'll have to cancel all services. I don't have that money, I told her honestly. There's been a misunderstanding about who is supposed to pay for what. I'm sorry, Mrs. Santos, but that's not my problem. The contracts clearly show you as the responsible party. If payment isn't received, there will be no wedding tomorrow. That night, Maria came to stay with me. We sat together on my old couch, both of us crying. Her beautiful wedding dress hung on the door, looking like a ghost of broken dreams. I'm so sorry, baby, I whispered, holding my daughter while she sobbed. I'm so sorry I let this happen. It's not your fault, Mama, Maria said through her tears. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked more questions. I was so caught up in the fairy tale that I forgot fairy tales aren't real. We stayed up all night, holding each other and crying for the wedding that would never happen, for the family that had betrayed us, and for the innocence we had both lost. Then, at 8 a.m. on what should have been Maria's wedding day, my phone rang. It was Patricia Williams, the wedding planner. Mrs. Santos, I have an update on your situation, she said, and something in her voice made my blood run cold. Mrs. Santos, I have an update on your situation, Patricia Williams said, her voice crisp and businesslike. The Rodriguez family has contacted me this morning. They've decided to move forward with the wedding today, but there have been some changes. My heart jumped with hope. Maybe David had finally stood up to his parents. Maybe they had realized how cruel they were being to Maria. What kind of changes? I asked, gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. Well, they're keeping all the vendors, the venue, the flowers, everything we planned. But they're having a different wedding. I felt confused. I don't understand. What do you mean, a different wedding? David is marrying someone else today. A girl named Isabella Martinez from a family that the Rodriguez family approves of. They're using all the decorations and arrangements we planned for Maria, but Maria is no longer invited to attend. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. Maria, who had been listening from the kitchen, came running over with panic in her eyes. Mama? What's wrong? What did she say? I picked up the phone with shaking hands. Are you telling me that David is marrying another girl today? Using the wedding we planned for my daughter? That's correct, Patricia said without any emotion in her voice. And Mrs. Santos, about that $300,000 deposit you're responsible for? The Rodriguez family wants you to know that even though your daughter is no longer part of the wedding, you still need to pay the full amount. All the contracts have your signature, and legally, you're still responsible for all costs. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. But we're not even having the wedding anymore. My daughter isn't marrying David. The wedding is still happening, Mrs. Santos. Just with a different bride. All the services are still being used, so all payments are still due. I need that $300,000 transferred by noon, or I'll have to take legal action against you. Maria grabbed the phone from my hands. This is Maria Santos. You cannot be serious. My fiancé is marrying someone else at our wedding, and you still want my mother to pay for it. I'm sorry, Miss Santos, but business is business. Your mother signed the contracts. She's legally responsible. Maria hung up the phone and sank onto our couch, staring at the wall like she couldn't believe what was happening. Mama, she whispered, how can they do this? How can people be so cruel? I sat next to my daughter and put my arm around her. I don't know, baby. I really don't know. For the next hour, we just sat there in shock. Then Maria's phone started buzzing with text messages. She looked at it, and her face went even more pale. What is it? I asked. It's my friends, she said quietly. They're asking why Isabella Martinez is posting pictures on social media, wearing my wedding dress. She's at the hotel getting ready for the wedding. I felt anger building in my chest like a fire. This girl Isabella was actually wearing the wedding dress that was meant for my Maria? The dress that Maria had tried on dozens of times. The dress she had dreamed about wearing on the happiest day of her life? Show me, I said. Maria handed me her phone, and I saw pictures of a girl I didn't recognize. She was wearing the exact same dress Maria was supposed to wear, surrounded by bridesmaids in the same dresses Maria's friends were supposed to wear. The flowers, the decorations, everything was exactly the same as what we had planned for months. But instead of my daughter's face glowing with happiness, it was this stranger, this Isabella, smiling like she had just won the lottery. How long has David known this Isabella girl? I asked Maria. Maria's voice was so quiet I could barely hear her. I don't know, Mama. I thought David and I told each other everything. But looking at these pictures, it seems like they've been planning this for a while. Look at how comfortable she looks with his family. I looked at more pictures on Isabella's social media. There were photos of her having dinner with the Rodriguez family from weeks ago. There were pictures of her trying on wedding dresses with Mrs. Rodriguez. There were even photos of David and Isabella together from months ago, back when David was still engaged to my Maria. Maria, I said slowly, I think David has been cheating on you. I think his family has been planning this for months. They used us to plan and pay for the wedding they wanted for David and Isabella. Maria looked at the photos again, and I watched her heart break all over again. You're right, Mama. Look at this picture. This was taken 3 months ago, but David told me he was working late that night. He was actually out with her. The anger in my chest was growing stronger. These people hadn't just broken my daughter's heart. They had lied to us, used us, and now they wanted us to pay for their deception. We have to go to that hotel, I said, standing up from the couch. Mama, what are you talking about? I'm not letting them get away with this. They think they can treat us like garbage and walk all over us because we don't have money. But I'm going to show them that money isn't everything. Sometimes, pride and dignity are worth more than all the dollars in the world. Maria looked scared. What are you going to do? I'm going to that wedding, and I'm going to tell everyone there exactly what kind of family the Rodriguez family really is. But Mama, we're not invited. Security won't let us in. I smiled for the first time in days, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile my own grandmother used to get when someone had pushed her too far. Let me worry about getting in. You just put on your prettiest dress. We're going to crash a wedding. An hour later, Maria and I were dressed in our best clothes, walking into the fanciest hotel in our city. I had called my sister Carmen and asked her to come with us for support. Carmen was a tough woman who didn't take nonsense from anyone, and I knew I might need her help. The hotel lobby was decorated with the most beautiful flowers I had ever seen. White roses and baby's breath everywhere, just like Maria had dreamed about. There were elegant signs pointing toward the Rodriguez-Martinez wedding and well-dressed people walking toward the ballroom. How are we going to get past security? Carmen whispered to me. Follow my lead, I said. I walked up to the front desk like I own the place. Excuse me, I'm Mrs. Santos. I'm here for the Rodriguez wedding. There seems to be some confusion about the guest list, but I'm actually the mother of the original bride. The wedding planner is expecting me. The young man at the desk looked confused but polite. Let me call the wedding planner to confirm. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm. A few minutes later, I saw Patricia Williams walking toward us. She was a tall woman with short blonde hair and a clipboard in her hand. When she saw me, her expression changed to annoyance. Mrs. Santos, what are you doing here? You're not on the guest list. I'm here about the $300,000 you say I owe, I said loudly enough that other people in the lobby could hear. I think we need to discuss this face to face. Patricia looked around nervously as people started to stare at us. This is not the time or place for this conversation. Oh, but I think it is, I said, my voice getting stronger. See, I think all these wedding guests should know that the bride's family made the original bride's family pay for this wedding and then kicked them out so their son could marry someone else instead. Patricia's face went red. Mrs. Santos, please lower your voice. Why should I lower my voice? Are you embarrassed? You should be embarrassed. What you're doing is wrong. By now, a small crowd of wedding guests had gathered around us, listening to every word. I could see some of them looking shocked and whispering to each other. Security, Patricia called out. But before security could reach us, I heard a familiar voice behind me. What's going on here? I turned around and saw David Rodriguez standing there in his wedding tuxedo. He looked handsome and nervous, but when he saw Maria, his face went completely white. Maria, he said, like he couldn't believe she was really there. What are you doing here? Maria stepped forward, and I was so proud of how strong and dignified she looked. I'm here to watch you marry Isabella using the wedding that was planned for us, David. The wedding my mother is supposed to pay $300,000 for, even though you're marrying someone else. David looked around at all the people staring at us, and I could see panic in his eyes. Maria, you don't understand. My family, they said. They said what, David? Maria interrupted. They said I wasn't good enough for you? They said my family was too poor? So you decided to betray me and marry Isabella instead, but still make my mother pay for your wedding. The crowd of wedding guests was getting bigger. I could see Mrs. Rodriguez pushing through the people, looking furious. Behind her was a girl in a wedding dress who must have been Isabella. This is outrageous, Mrs. Rodriguez shouted when she reached us. Security, remove these people immediately. But something wonderful happened then. One of the wedding guests, an older man in an expensive suit, stepped forward. Wait a minute, he said in a loud, clear voice. I want to hear what these ladies have to say. If what I'm understanding is correct, you made this young lady's family pay for a wedding, and then your son is marrying someone else instead. That doesn't sound right to me. More people started speaking up, asking questions, demanding to know what was really going on. Mrs. Rodriguez looked around desperately, realizing that her perfect wedding was turning into a disaster. That's when Patricia Williams, the wedding planner, made the announcement that would change everything. Patricia Williams raised her voice above the growing crowd of confused and angry wedding guests. Ladies and gentlemen, please. There's been a misunderstanding. The Santos family was never supposed to attend this wedding. They need to leave immediately. But the older gentleman in the expensive suit wasn't having it. Ma'am, I'm Judge Harold Morrison, and I've been performing weddings for 30 years. What I'm hearing here sounds like fraud to me. This young lady's family paid for a wedding, and now you're giving it to someone else. Mrs. Rodriguez's face turned bright red. Judge Morrison, you don't understand the situation. The Santos family couldn't afford the lifestyle David needs. We found him a more suitable bride from a better family. But who paid for all this? Judge Morrison asked, gesturing around at the expensive decorations and flowers. I stepped forward, my voice shaking but strong. I did, Your Honor. I signed contracts for $300,000 worth of wedding services. But I thought I was planning my daughter's wedding to David. I never knew they were planning to replace her with another girl. The crowd gasped, and I heard people whispering words like terrible and how cruel, and that's not right. Isabella, the new bride, finally spoke up. Her voice was high and nervous. David told me his ex-girlfriend's family was happy to pay for our wedding as a gift. He said it was their way of wishing us well. Maria laughed, but it was a bitter sound. A gift? David, did you tell her it was a gift? David looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I thought, my mother said you understood. I understood nothing, Maria shouted, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I heard real anger in my daughter's voice instead of just sadness. You let me plan my dream wedding for 6 months. You let my mother go into debt for decorations and flowers and food. And then 3 days before the wedding, you tell me you're marrying someone else instead? Judge Morrison looked disgusted. Son, is that really what happened? Before David could answer, Mrs. Rodriguez grabbed his arm. David, you don't have to answer these questions. We're having a private family celebration, and these people are trespassing. But Judge Morrison wasn't finished. Mrs. Rodriguez, if these ladies paid for this wedding and you're using their money to throw a party for your son and different bride, that's theft. That's a serious crime. It's not theft. Mrs. Rodriguez snapped. They signed contracts. Everything is legal. That's when my sister Carmen, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward with fire in her eyes. Legal doesn't mean right, lady. You tricked them into paying for a wedding and then stole it from them. The wedding guests were now talking loudly among themselves. Some of them were taking pictures with their phones. Others were shaking their heads in disgust. I could see that Mrs. Rodriguez's perfect, elegant wedding was falling apart. Isabella started crying in her wedding dress, my daughter's wedding dress. David, is this true? Did you lie to me about everything? David looked back and forth between Maria and Isabella, his face pale and confused. I didn't lie to anyone. My family said this was the best thing for everyone. The best thing for everyone? Maria stepped closer to David, and I could see 3 years of love and trust crumbling in her eyes. David, I loved you. I thought you loved me too. How is breaking my heart and stealing my wedding the best thing for me? I do love you, Maria, David said quietly. But my family is right. We're from different worlds. You would never fit into my life. Those words hit Maria like a slap. I watched my strong, beautiful daughter's shoulders slump as she realized that the man she loved was choosing money and social status over her. But then something amazing happened. Maria straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and looked David right in the eyes. You're right, David. We are from different worlds. I come from a world where people keep their promises, where families support each other instead of tearing each other down, where love means more than money. You're right, I would never fit into your world because your world is ugly. The crowd fell silent. Even Mrs. Rodriguez stopped talking. Maria continued, her voice getting stronger with every word. I thought I wanted to marry you and become part of your family. But standing here now, looking at how cruel you can be, I realize you did me a favor. I don't want to be part of a family that treats people like garbage. Judge Morrison started clapping slowly, and soon other wedding guests joined in. They were applauding my daughter for standing up to the Rodriguez family. Mrs. Rodriguez looked panicked. This is ridiculous. Security. Get these people out of here right now. But Patricia Williams, the wedding planner, was looking at her clipboard with a worried expression. Mrs. Rodriguez, we have a problem. If the Santos family files a complaint about fraud, I could lose my business license. This whole situation is very irregular. What are you saying? Mrs. Rodriguez demanded. I'm saying maybe we should work out some kind of arrangement with the Santos family. Return part of their money, or… Absolutely not. Mrs. Rodriguez shouted. They signed the contracts. We don't owe them anything. That's when I finally lost my temper. All the hurt, all the frustration, all the anger I had been holding inside for days came pouring out. You know what, Mrs. Rodriguez? You're right. You don't owe me any money. But let me tell you what you do owe me. I stepped closer to her, and even though she was taller than me and wearing expensive clothes, I could see fear in her eyes. You owe my daughter an apology for lying to her for 6 months. You owe me an apology for tricking me into signing contracts I couldn't afford. You owe both of us an apology for treating us like we're not good enough to breathe the same air as you. Mrs. Rodriguez lifted her chin defiantly. I don't owe you people anything. You're right again, I said, my voice getting dangerously quiet. You don't owe us anything because we don't want anything from people like you. But let me tell you what's going to happen next. The entire crowd leaned in to hear what I was going to say. Even the hotel security guards who had arrived were listening instead of escorting us out. I'm going to walk out of here with my dignity and my daughter. And you're going to have your fancy wedding with your stolen flowers and your stolen decorations. But every single person in this room now knows exactly what kind of family you really are. They know you're the kind of people who lie and cheat and steal from families who trusted you. I looked around at all the wedding guests. And I hope all of you remember this day. I hope you remember that having money doesn't make you a good person. I hope you remember that treating people with kindness and respect matters more than having the fanciest wedding or the biggest house. Judge Morrison nodded approvingly. Well said, ma'am. Very well said. I took Maria's hand and turned to leave, but Isabella suddenly called out. Wait. Please wait. We turned back, and Isabella was walking toward us, tears streaming down her face. She was still wearing Maria's wedding dress, but now she looked uncomfortable in it. Mrs. Santos, Maria, I'm so sorry. I didn't know any of this. David told me you were happy for us. He said your family wanted to help pay for the wedding as a blessing for our marriage. Maria looked at Isabella with sadness in her eyes. Isabella, I don't blame you. But you need to know that the man you're about to marry is a liar. If he could lie to me for 6 months while planning to marry you, what makes you think he won't lie to you too? Isabella looked at David with new eyes, like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. David, is that true? Did you lie to Maria about everything? David's face crumpled. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I was just trying to do what my family wanted. By lying to everyone? Isabella asked. By letting Maria's family pay for our wedding while pretending you still loved her? David started to say, but no words came out. Isabella started pulling off her engagement ring. I can't marry someone who would do this to another person. If you could be this cruel to Maria, who loved you for 3 years, what would you do to me when things get difficult? Mrs. Rodriguez looked horrified. Isabella, don't be ridiculous. David is a good man. The Santos family is just causing trouble. But Isabella shook her head. No, Mrs. Rodriguez. A good man doesn't lie to the woman he claims to love. A good man doesn't let his girlfriend's family pay for his wedding to another woman. She handed the ring to David and started walking toward the hotel exit. I'm sorry, but I can't be part of this. The crowd of wedding guests started murmuring excitedly. Some of them were following Isabella out of the ballroom. Others were shaking their heads at the Rodriguez family. Mrs. Rodriguez looked around desperately as she watched her perfect wedding disappear. This is all your fault, she screamed at me. You've ruined everything. But before I could respond, something happened that no one expected. Before I could respond to Mrs. Rodriguez's accusation, a new voice cut through the chaos like a knife. Actually, Mother, this is all my fault. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. Standing in the doorway of the ballroom was an older man in an expensive gray suit. He had salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, but his face looked tired and disappointed. I had never seen him before, but from the way Mrs. Rodriguez's face went completely white, I knew this was someone important. Father, David said, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought you were in New York on business. I was supposed to be, the man said, walking slowly into the ballroom. But I got a very interesting phone call this morning from my friend Judge Morrison here. He told me there was some kind of problem with your wedding, so I caught the first flight home. Judge Morrison stepped forward. Roberto, I'm sorry to have bothered you, but when I heard what was happening here, I thought you should know. So this was Roberto Rodriguez, David's father. I had heard Maria mention him before, but he had always been traveling for business whenever we visited. From what Maria had told me, he seemed like a decent man, unlike his wife. Roberto looked around the ballroom, taking in the expensive decorations, the confused wedding guests, and his son standing there looking guilty and ashamed. Now, Roberto said in a calm but stern voice, would someone please explain to me why my son's ex-girlfriend's family is here demanding money, and why my son's current bride just walked out of her own wedding? Mrs. Rodriguez rushed to her husband's side. Roberto, darling, it's all a misunderstanding. These people are just trying to cause trouble. They're upset because David chose to marry a girl from a better family. Roberto held up his hand to stop his wife from talking. Then he looked directly at me. Ma'am, I don't believe we've met. I'm Roberto Rodriguez, David's father. I'm Elena Santos, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. This is my daughter Maria. Roberto's expression softened when he looked at Maria. Ah, you're Maria. David has told me so much about you over the years. He said you were the kindest, smartest girl he had ever met. Maria's eyes filled with tears again. He said that. Many times, Roberto nodded. In fact, just last month when I was in Chicago, he called me and said he couldn't wait for me to meet his future daughter-in-law at the wedding. He said you were going to make the most beautiful bride. David's face turned red. Dad, I can explain? Oh, I hope you can, Roberto said, and there was steel in his voice. Because right now, I'm very confused. Last month you were planning to marry Maria. Today, you were supposed to marry someone named Isabella. And from what I'm hearing, Maria's family paid for this wedding that you were going to have with another girl? The ballroom fell silent. Everyone was waiting to hear David's explanation. David looked around desperately, like he was hoping someone would rescue him. Finally, he stammered, Dad, Mother said that Maria's family wasn't, that they wouldn't fit in with our social circle. She said Isabella's family would be a better match for our business. Roberto's eyes flashed with anger, but he kept his voice controlled. Your mother said that, did she? Roberto, Mrs. Rodriguez interrupted. You know I only want what's best for our family. The Martinez family has connections that could help David's career. The Santos family, well, they work in service jobs. Roberto looked at his wife like he had never seen her before. Carmen, did you just say that people who work honest jobs aren't good enough for our family? That's not what I meant, Mrs. Rodriguez said quickly. I just meant that David needs to marry someone who can help him in the business world. I see, Roberto said slowly. And to help David marry this business-appropriate girl, you made Maria's family pay for the wedding? Patricia Williams, who had been trying to stay invisible during this family confrontation, suddenly spoke up. Mr. Rodriguez, sir, about the contracts. Mrs. Santos did sign agreements for $300,000 worth of services. Legally, she's still responsible for payment. Roberto turned to look at the wedding planner, and I saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. Ms. Williams, are you telling me that you allowed an elderly woman who works at a grocery store to sign contracts for $300,000 without questioning whether she could afford it? Patricia's face went pale. Well, Mrs. Rodriguez assured me that the family could handle the costs. Did you verify Mrs. Santos's income before letting her sign these contracts? I know, sir. I trusted Mrs. Rodriguez's word. Roberto shook his head in disgust. So you allowed my wife to trick this family into signing contracts they couldn't afford for a wedding that was never really going to be theirs. Sir, I was just following standard procedures. Standard procedures? Roberto's voice got louder. Standard procedures would be to make sure people can afford what they're signing up for. Standard procedures would be to be honest about who's paying for what. He turned to look at me, and I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. Mrs. Santos, I owe you and your daughter a sincere apology. This is not how my family should behave. This is not how I raised my son. I was so surprised by his kindness that I almost started crying again. After days of being treated like garbage by his wife and son, his simple apology felt like a warm hug. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, I said quietly. Roberto walked over to David, who was now looking at the floor like a scolded child. David, look at me, Roberto said sternly. David slowly raised his head to meet his father's eyes. Son, I am deeply disappointed in you. Maria's family trusted you. They opened their home to you. They welcomed you like a son. And they scraped together money. They didn't have to give you a beautiful wedding. And you repaid their love and trust by lying to them and abandoning Maria for someone else. Dad, I love Maria, but Mother said... I don't care what your mother said. Roberto's voice boomed through the ballroom. You're 28 years old, David. You're old enough to make your own decisions and stand up for what's right. He turned to Maria, his expression gentle again. Maria, my dear, I am so sorry for what my family has put you through. You deserved so much better than this. Maria wiped tears from her eyes. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. That means more to me than you know. Roberto nodded, then turned back to his wife and son. Now, here's what's going to happen. David, you're going to apologize to Maria for lying to her and breaking her heart. But Dad. No buts, son. Apologize. Now. David walked slowly toward Maria. He looked like he wanted to say something meaningful, but the words that came out were weak and pathetic. Maria, I'm sorry things worked out this way. I never meant to hurt you. Maria looked at him with sad eyes. David, you didn't just hurt me. You destroyed me. For 6 months, I planned our life together. I imagined our children, our home, growing old with you. And while I was dreaming about our future, you were planning to throw me away like trash. David's face crumpled. I do love you, Maria. I've always loved you. No, Maria said firmly. If you loved me, you would have fought for me. If you loved me, you would have told your mother that I was worth more than business connections and social status. Love means choosing someone every day, even when it's hard. You chose money and status over me. That's not love. Roberto nodded approvingly. Well said, Maria. Very well said. He turned to Patricia Williams. Ms. Williams, you're going to tear up those contracts right now. The Santos family owes you nothing. But sir, legally, you helped my wife commit fraud. Would you like me to call my attorney and discuss the legal implications of your actions? Patricia quickly started shuffling through her papers. Of course, Mr. Rodriguez. I'll void all the contracts immediately. Good. And you're going to return any deposits the Santos family has already paid. Yes, sir, absolutely. Roberto then turned to his wife, and the look he gave her made me glad I wasn't married to him. Carmen, we need to have a very serious conversation about your behavior. But that will happen privately at home. Mrs. Rodriguez looked like she wanted to argue, but something in her husband's tone told her this was not the time. Finally, Roberto looked at me. Mrs. Santos, I know this doesn't fix the pain we've caused, but I want to make this right. Please allow me to compensate your family for all the trouble we've put you through. I stood up straight and looked this decent man in the eyes. Mr. Rodriguez, I appreciate your kindness, but we don't want your money. All we ever wanted was for your son to treat my daughter with respect and honesty. We don't need payment for that. We just needed basic human decency. Roberto smiled sadly. You're a remarkable woman, Mrs. Santos. David was a fool to let Maria go. That's when something unexpected happened that shocked everyone in the room. That's when David suddenly dropped to his knees right there in the middle of the ballroom, in front of all the wedding guests, his parents, and everyone else. "Maria, please," he cried out, tears streaming down his face. "I made a terrible mistake. I love you, not Isabella. I want to marry you, not her. Please give me another chance." The entire ballroom went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. All the fancy wedding guests stood there with their mouths open, watching this grown man beg on his knees. Maria stared down at David like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "David, what are you doing?" "I'm fighting for you," David said, his voice breaking. "You were right. If I really loved you, I should have fought for you from the beginning. I should have told my mother that you were more important than business connections or social status. I'm fighting for you now." Mrs. Rodriguez looked horrified. "David, get up. You're making a fool of yourself in front of everyone." But David ignored his mother. He looked only at Maria. "I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust. But I love you, Maria. I've loved you for 3 years, and I'll love you for the rest of my life. Please marry me. Today. Right now." Maria's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were happy tears or sad tears. "David, you can't be serious. 5 minutes ago, you were supposed to marry Isabella." "I was making the biggest mistake of my life," David said. "Isabella was right to leave. She saw what kind of man I was becoming, and she didn't want any part of it. But you, Maria, you've seen the worst of me, and you're still here. That has to mean something." Judge Morrison stepped forward. "Son, this is very dramatic, but marriage isn't something you decide in a moment of panic. These 2 young people need time to work through what's happened here." But David shook his head. "No, Your Honor. I've wasted enough time. I've hurt the woman I love because I was too weak to stand up to my family. I don't want to waste another minute." Roberto looked torn between pride and concern for his son. "David, are you sure about this? 5 minutes ago, you were telling Maria she wouldn't fit into your world." "I was wrong, Dad. Maria doesn't need to fit into my world. I need to fit into hers. I need to become the kind of man who deserves her love." I watched my daughter's face as David poured his heart out. I could see the war going on inside her, the love she still felt for him fighting against the pain he had caused. "David," Maria said softly, how do I know you won't change your mind again? How do I know that tomorrow or next week you won't decide I'm not good enough again?" David stood up and took Maria's hands in his. "Because I'm not the same man who is too cowardly to fight for you. These last few days, watching you walk away, knowing I had lost you, it nearly killed me. I realized that nothing my mother wants for me matters if I don't have you." Mrs. Rodriguez made a disgusted sound. "This is ridiculous. David, you're throwing away your future for a girl who works at a grocery store." Roberto turned to his wife with fire in his eyes. "Carmen, if you say one more cruel word about this family, you and I are going to have a very public argument that you will not win." Mrs. Rodriguez's mouth snapped shut. David never took his eyes off Maria. "I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I broke your heart and your trust. But if you'll have me, I swear on my life that I will spend every day proving that I'm worthy of your love." The wedding guests were watching this like it was a movie. Some of the women were crying. Even some of the men looked emotional. Maria was quiet for a long moment, studying David's face. Finally, she spoke. "David, I do still love you. I probably always will. But love isn't enough. Trust is more important than love, and you destroyed my trust in you." David's face fell. "Does that mean there's no hope for us?" "I didn't say that," Maria replied. "But if you want to earn back my trust, it's going to take time. It's going to take actions, not just words. And it's going to require you to become a different man than the one who abandoned me 3 days ago." David nodded eagerly. "Yes, anything. I'll do anything." "First," Maria said, "you need to apologize to your father for lying to him and to Isabella for using her." David immediately turned to Roberto. "Dad, I'm sorry I lied to you about Maria. I'm sorry I was too weak to be the man you raised me to be." Roberto nodded. "Apology accepted, son. But I agree with Maria. You need to prove you've changed." Then David pulled out his phone. I need to call Isabella and apologize to her properly. He dialed Isabella's number, and when she answered, he put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. Isabella, it's David. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to apologize. Isabella's voice sounded tired and sad. David, I'm at the airport. I'm flying back to Miami. I can't be part of this mess. I don't blame you, David said. I lied to you about everything. I used you to try to make myself feel better about hurting Maria. You deserved honesty, and I gave you lies. I'm sorry. There was silence on the phone for a moment. Then Isabella said, Thank you for apologizing, David. I hope you and Maria can work things out. She seems like a good person who really loves you. She is, David agreed. And I love her too. I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it to her. After David hung up, Maria nodded approvingly. That was the right thing to do. What else? David asked. What else do you need me to do? Maria thought for a moment. You need to make it clear to your mother that if she ever treats my family with disrespect again, you'll choose us over her. Every time. David turned to face Mrs. Rodriguez. Mother, I love you, but Maria and her family are going to be part of my life. If you can't treat them with respect, then you won't be seeing much of me. Mrs. Rodriguez looked shocked. David, you can't mean that. I absolutely mean it, David said firmly. Mrs. Santos welcomed me into her home like a son. Maria loved me with her whole heart. You repaid their kindness by lying to them and trying to steal their money. That ends now. Roberto put his hand on his son's shoulder. I'm proud of you for saying that, David. Judge Morrison stepped forward again. This is all very touching, but we still have a ballroom full of confused wedding guests and no actual wedding taking place. David looked around at all the people who had come to see him get married. You're right, Your Honor. Everyone came here expecting a wedding. He turned back to Maria. I know you said you need time to trust me again, but would you at least consider having dinner with me tonight? We could start over. Do this right this time. Maria smiled, the first real smile I had seen from her in days. I think I'd like that. The wedding guests started applauding and cheering. Even Judge Morrison was smiling. But then Patricia Williams cleared her throat loudly. Excuse me, everyone. I hate to interrupt this moment, but we still have a practical problem. We have a fully catered reception for 200 people, a wedding cake, a DJ, and a ballroom reserved until midnight. What are we supposed to do with all of this? Roberto grinned. That's easy. We're going to have a party. A party? Patricia asked. A celebration, Roberto clarified. We're celebrating my son coming to his senses. We're celebrating Maria's strength and dignity. We're celebrating families coming together instead of being torn apart. He turned to address all the wedding guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you came here expecting a wedding, but instead you got to witness something even more special. You got to see what happens when love wins over pride and fear. Please stay and help us celebrate that. The crowd cheered again, and people started moving toward the reception hall. But just as everyone was feeling good and the crisis seemed to be over, Mrs. Rodriguez did something that shocked us all. Just as everyone was feeling good and moving toward the reception hall, Mrs. Rodriguez suddenly grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and threw it right at Maria's face. This is all your fault, she screamed, her perfectly styled hair now messy and her expensive makeup running. You've turned my son against me. You've ruined everything. The champagne dripped down Maria's face and onto her dress. The entire ballroom fell silent again, but this time the silence felt dangerous. Roberto's face turned bright red with anger. Carmen, what is wrong with you? But Mrs. Rodriguez wasn't finished. She was having what my grandmother would have called a complete breakdown. 28 years I've been planning David's future. 28 years of making sure he had the best education, the best connections, the best opportunities. And this little nobody is going to destroy it all. She pointed a shaking finger at Maria, who was calmly wiping champagne from her face with a napkin someone had handed her. You think you've won? Mrs. Rodriguez continued, her voice getting higher and more hysterical. You think David really loves you? He's just feeling guilty. In a few weeks, when the guilt wears off, He'll realize what he's giving up for you. David stepped protectively in front of Maria. Mother, stop it. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself? Mrs. Rodriguez laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You're the one who's about to throw away everything I've built for this family. That's when I had heard enough. I stepped forward and looked Mrs. Rodriguez right in the eyes. Ma'am, I've been quiet and polite this whole time because that's how I was raised. But throwing champagne at my daughter crosses a line you can't uncross. Mrs. Rodriguez turned her anger on me. Don't you dare lecture me. You're nothing. Your daughter is nothing. You work in a grocery store. You're right, I said calmly. I do work in a grocery store. I work 40 hours a week bagging groceries and helping customers. And you know what? I'm proud of that work. I've never had to lie or cheat or steal to pay my bills. I've never had to hurt other people to make myself feel important. The wedding guests were watching this confrontation like it was a championship boxing match. I raised my daughter to be kind, honest, and strong. I continued. You raised your son to be weak, dishonest, and cruel. Which one of us did a better job? Mrs. Rodriguez's face went white, then red, then purple. How dare you? Oh, I dare, I said, my voice getting stronger. Because unlike you, I'm not afraid of the truth. The truth is that you're so insecure about yourself that you have to put other people down to feel better. The truth is that you're so worried about what other people think that you forgot to teach your son how to be a good person. Roberto started walking toward his wife. Carmen, that's enough. You need to apologize to Mrs. Santos and Maria right now. I will not apologize to these people, Mrs. Rodriguez shrieked. Then you need to leave, Roberto said firmly. Mrs. Rodriguez stared at her husband like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Are you choosing them over me too? I'm choosing decency over cruelty, Roberto replied. I'm choosing kindness over snobbery. And if you can't understand the difference, then yes, I'm choosing them over you. For a moment, Mrs. Rodriguez just stood there, looking around the ballroom at all the people staring at her. I think she was finally realizing how badly she had behaved, how many people had witnessed her breakdown. Fine, she said quietly, her voice now cold and bitter. But don't come crying to me when this little fairy tale falls apart. Don't come to me when David realizes what he's given up. She gathered up her purse and started walking toward the exit. But before she left, she turned around one last time. Maria, she called out, enjoy it while it lasts. But remember, I'll always be David's mother. I'll always be part of his life. And I'll be waiting for the day when he comes to his senses. With that, she walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind a room full of shocked guests and a family that was broken apart. The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, David spoke. I'm sorry, he said to everyone in the room. I'm sorry you all had to witness that. I'm sorry my mother behaved so badly. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. Son, you're not responsible for your mother's actions. You can only control your own behavior. Roberto nodded sadly. David's right, though. I owe everyone here an apology for my wife's behavior. That was unacceptable. Maria, who had been quiet during this whole confrontation, finally spoke up. Mr. Rodriguez, you don't need to apologize for your wife. We all make our own choices. She chose to throw champagne at me, but you chose to defend me. Those are two different choices. Roberto smiled at Maria with genuine warmth. You're very wise, my dear, and very forgiving. I'm trying to be, Maria replied. Anger is like poison. It hurts the person carrying it more than anyone else. I don't want to carry that poison around. David looked at Maria with such love and admiration in his eyes. That's why I love you. Even after everything that's happened, you're still thinking about forgiveness instead of revenge. Well, I said, trying to lighten the mood, your mother did waste a perfectly good glass of champagne. In my neighborhood, that's a crime. A few people chuckled, and I could feel the tension in the room starting to ease. Patricia Williams approached us cautiously. Excuse me, but what would you like to do about the reception? We still have all the food and music. Roberto clapped his hands together. We're still having the party. In fact, after all this drama, I think we need it more than ever. He turned to address the wedding guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I know this hasn't been the wedding you expected, but I hope you'll stay and help us celebrate something important: the power of love and forgiveness to overcome hatred and prejudice. The crowd started moving toward the reception hall, talking excitedly among themselves about everything they had just witnessed. David took Maria's hand. Are you okay? I'm so sorry my mother threw champagne at you. Maria squeezed his hand. I'm fine, David. It takes more than spilled champagne to hurt me. You handled that with such grace, David said admiringly. I don't know how you stayed so calm. Maria smiled. My mama taught me that when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Your mother showed everyone exactly who she is today. There's nothing more I need to know about her. As we walked toward the reception, I felt proud of my daughter. She had faced cruelty and betrayal with dignity and strength. She had forgiven without being weak, and stood up for herself without being mean. The reception was actually fun. The food was delicious, the music was good, and people seemed to enjoy themselves despite all the drama. David never left Maria's side, and I could see him working hard to show her that he had changed. Judge Morrison came up to me during dinner. Mrs. Santos, I wanted to tell you how impressed I am with you and your daughter. You both handled a very difficult situation with remarkable grace. Thank you, Judge Morrison. That means a lot coming from you. I've been performing weddings for 30 years, he continued, and I've never seen anything quite like what happened today. But I've also never seen a young woman handle betrayal and cruelty with such dignity as your daughter did. She gets that from her grandmother, I said proudly. My mother always said that how you treat people when you're angry shows your true character. Judge Morrison nodded. Your mother was a wise woman. As the evening went on, I watched David and Maria talking quietly at their table. They looked serious, like they were having an important conversation about their future. Finally, David stood up and asked the DJ to turn down the music. He had something to say to everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, David announced, I know today didn't go as anyone expected, but I learned something important today about love, about family, and about the kind of man I want to be. The room fell quiet as everyone listened. I learned that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day. I learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who support you and believe in you. And I learned that being a good man means standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. He turned to look at Maria. I have a lot of work to do to earn back Maria's trust, but she's given me a chance to prove that I can be the man she deserves. And I'm not going to waste that chance. The crowd applauded, and I felt hopeful for the first time in days. But then, just as the party was winding down and people were starting to say their goodbyes, something happened that no one saw coming. Just as people were starting to say their goodbyes and the party was winding down, the ballroom doors burst open, and Mrs. Rodriguez came marching back in. But she wasn't alone this time. Behind her were 2 police officers and a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. There they are, officers. Mrs. Rodriguez pointed directly at me and Maria. Those are the women who have been threatening and harassing my family. Everyone in the reception hall stopped what they were doing and stared. The music stopped. Conversation stopped. Even the waiters stopped clearing tables. One of the police officers, a tall woman with kind eyes, walked over to us. Ma'am, I'm Officer Rodriguez, no relation, she said with a slight smile. We received a complaint that you've been making threats against this family? I felt my heart start racing. Officer, we haven't threatened anyone. We've just been trying to get our money back for a wedding that didn't happen. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward dramatically. They've been harassing us all day. They crashed our private wedding, caused a scene, and made threats about ruining our reputation. The man with the briefcase opened it and pulled out some papers. I'm Attorney Michael Chun, representing the Rodriguez family. We have witnesses who heard these women making threats of violence and extortion. Judge Morrison, who had been watching this unfold with growing anger, stepped forward. Now wait just a minute. I've been here all day, and I haven't heard anyone make any threats. Your Honor, Attorney Chun said, with all due respect, you may not have heard everything that was said. Roberto looked confused and angry. Carmen, what are you doing? Why did you call the police? I'm protecting our family, Mrs. Rodriguez replied. These people have been trying to extort money from us. They've been making scenes and embarrassing us in public. It needs to stop. Officer Rodriguez looked around the room. Is there anyone else here who witnessed any threats being made? Several wedding guests started speaking up at once. I was here the whole time, and I didn't hear any threats. The Santos family was very polite, even when they were being insulted. If anyone was making threats, it was Mrs. Rodriguez. Patricia Williams, the wedding planner, stepped forward nervously. Officer, I can confirm that Mrs. Santos signed contracts for $300,000, but there was definitely some confusion about who was supposed to pay for what. Attorney Chin smiled smugly.
Exactly.
Mrs. Santos signed legal contracts and is now trying to get out of paying by making threats and causing public disturbances. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. How had asking for fairness turned into criminal charges? But then something wonderful happened. Judge Morrison pulled out his own phone. Officer Rodriguez, I think you need to see this, he said. I've been recording parts of today's events on my phone, including Mrs. Carmen Rodriguez throwing champagne at this young lady and making threats of her own. Mrs. Rodriguez's face went white. You were recording? I started recording when things got heated, in case there were legal issues later, Judge Morrison explained. And I'm glad I did, because this video clearly shows who is actually making threats and who is being threatened. He played the video on his phone, and everyone could hear Mrs. Rodriguez screaming at Maria and me, calling us nothing, and saying we would regret crossing her family. Officer Rodriguez listened to the recording with a serious expression. Then she looked at Mrs. Rodriguez. Ma'am, based on what I'm hearing here, it sounds like you were the one making threats, not these ladies. That's not. I was just defending my family, Mrs. Rodriguez stammered. By throwing champagne at someone and threatening them? Officer Rodriguez asked. Ma'am, that could be considered assault. Roberto stepped between his wife and the police officer. Officer, I apologize for wasting your time. My wife is upset about family issues, and she let her emotions get the better of her. No one here wants to press charges against anyone. But Officer Rodriguez shook her head. Mr. Rodriguez, your wife called us here claiming these ladies committed crimes. Now I have evidence that she may have committed assault and filing a false police report. I have to take this seriously. Mrs. Rodriguez looked panicked. I want to drop the complaint. I don't want to press charges anymore. It's too late for that, ma'am, Officer Rodriguez explained. Once we're here investigating, we have to complete our investigation. Attorney Chin was looking very uncomfortable. Officer, perhaps this is all just a big misunderstanding. Family disputes can get emotional. Mr. Chin, are you telling me your client filed a false police report? Officer Rodriguez asked sternly. The attorney started shuffling his papers nervously. Not intentionally, of course. Perhaps she was just confused about what constitutes a threat. I watched Mrs. Rodriguez realize that her plan to have us arrested was backfiring on her. She looked around the room desperately, like she was hoping someone would rescue her. David finally spoke up. Officer, this is my mother. She's been under a lot of stress today, and she made some very poor decisions. But I don't think anyone here wants to see her arrested. Officer Rodriguez looked at David with respect. That's very generous of you, son. But your mother wasted police time and resources with false accusations. That's a serious matter. Maria stepped forward quietly. Officer, may I say something? Of course, miss. Maria looked directly at Mrs. Rodriguez, and when she spoke, her voice was calm and strong. Mrs. Rodriguez, you tried to have my mother and me arrested because you're angry that your plan didn't work. You wanted to humiliate us and scare us into going away quietly. But here's what you don't understand. We're not afraid of you. Mrs. Rodriguez opened her mouth to interrupt, but Maria held up her hand. I'm not finished. You threw champagne at me, you called my family garbage, you tried to steal our money, and now you tried to have us arrested on false charges. But despite all of that, I'm going to do something you would never do. I'm going to show you mercy. She turned to Officer Rodriguez. Officer, I don't want to press charges against Mrs. Rodriguez. She's already shown everyone here what kind of person she really is. That's punishment enough. The ballroom was completely silent. Even Mrs. Rodriguez was staring at Maria with shock. Officer Rodriguez nodded approvingly. That's very mature of you, miss. But Mrs. Rodriguez still needs to understand that filing false police reports is a crime. I'm going to give her a warning this time, but if we get called out here again for false accusations, there will be consequences. She turned to Mrs. Rodriguez with a stern expression. Ma'am, you need to stop harassing these people. They've shown you more kindness than you deserve. Don't make us come back here. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded weakly, looking like a deflated balloon. Attorney Chin quickly closed his briefcase. I think this matter is resolved. Mrs. Rodriguez, we should go. As the police officers and attorneys started to leave, Roberto called out to his wife. Carmen, wait. She turned around, hope in her eyes that maybe her husband was going to support her. But Roberto's expression was cold and disappointed. Pack your bags. I want you out of the house tonight. Mrs. Rodriguez looked shocked. Roberto, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, Roberto replied. I won't live with someone who would try to have innocent people arrested out of spite. I won't be married to someone who has no decency or kindness in her heart. But Roberto, I'm your wife. We've been married for 30 years, and in 30 years, I never realized how cruel you could be, Roberto said sadly. What you did today, to Maria's family, to our son, to everyone here, is unforgivable. Mrs. Rodriguez started crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and frustration. Fine, she screamed. But don't think this is over. I'll get the best divorce lawyer in the state. I'll take half of everything you own. Roberto smiled sadly. Carmen, you can take whatever money you want, but you'll never take back the respect you lost today. You'll never take back the way people look at you now. With that, Mrs. Rodriguez stormed out of the ballroom for the second time that day. But this time, I had a feeling she wouldn't be coming back. The silence that followed was different from all the other silences we'd had that day. This one felt like relief, like a storm finally passing. David walked over to his father and put his hand on Roberto's shoulder. Dad, I'm sorry about Mother. I'm sorry you had to make that choice. Roberto shook his head. I didn't make that choice, son. She made it when she decided that being right was more important than being kind. He turned to Maria and me with genuine warmth in his eyes. Mrs. Santos, Maria, I hope someday you can forgive my family for the pain we've caused you. Mr. Rodriguez, I said gently, your family didn't cause us pain. Your wife did. You and David are good men who got caught up in a bad situation. Thank you for saying that, Roberto replied. It means more than you know. As the remaining guests finally started to leave, I realized that this day, which had started as the worst day of our lives, was ending with something unexpected. As the remaining guests finally started to leave, I realized that this day, which had started as the worst day of our lives, was ending with something unexpected. Hope. David and Maria were sitting at a corner table, talking quietly but seriously about their future. Roberto was helping the hotel staff clean up, insisting on paying for everything despite our protests. And I was standing there watching it all, feeling like I had just lived through the most dramatic day of my entire life. Judge Morrison came over to me one last time before leaving. Mrs. Santos, I've been thinking about everything that happened today, and I want you to know something important. What's that, Judge? You and your daughter have shown more character and dignity in one day than most people show in a lifetime. You should be very proud. Thank you, Judge Morrison. That means a lot. He shook my hand warmly. If you ever need anything, legal advice, a character reference, anything at all, please don't hesitate to call me. After Judge Morrison left, Patricia Williams approached me nervously. She was holding a check in her hand. Mrs. Santos, I've spoken with Mr. Rodriguez, and we've agreed that your family should be compensated for all the trouble you've been put through. I looked at the check and my eyes widened. It was for $50,000. I can't accept this, I said, trying to hand the check back to her. Please, Patricia said. It's not charity. It's an apology. Mr. Rodriguez insisted, and honestly, After witnessing what happened today, I think you've more than earned it. Roberto walked over to us. Mrs. Santos, please take the money. Consider it payment for the lessons you taught my family today about kindness, forgiveness, and dignity. I looked at the check again. $50,000 was more money than I had ever seen at one time. It would pay off our house, fix our old car, and give Maria a chance to go back to school like she had always dreamed. Are you sure about this? I asked Roberto. I've never been more sure about anything, he replied. My wife cost your family far more than money today. She cost you peace of mind, dignity, and trust. This is the least I can do. I accepted the check with tears in my eyes. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. This will change our lives. Good, he smiled. That's exactly what I was hoping for. As Patricia Williams finished packing up her things, she turned to Maria. Miss Santos, I want to apologize for my part in this mess. I should have questioned the arrangements more carefully. I should have protected your family better. Thank you for saying that, Maria replied graciously. We all learned something today about being more careful with trust. Patricia nodded. If you ever decide to plan another wedding, maybe next year, when things have settled down, I'd be honored to help you do it right. No charge. Maria looked over at David, who was talking quietly with his father. Maybe someday. But if that day comes, it's going to be very different from today. Different how? I asked my daughter. Maria smiled. Smaller. Simpler. More about love and less about showing off. As the hotel staff finished cleaning up the ballroom, David and Roberto came over to us. Mrs. Santos, Maria, David said, I know I have a lot of work to do to earn back your trust. But I want you to know that today changed me. Watching how my mother treated you, and then watching how gracefully you handled it, showed me the kind of man I want to be. And what kind of man is that? Maria asked. The kind who fights for the people he loves, even when it's hard. The kind who chooses kindness over status. The kind who keeps his promises no matter what. Roberto nodded approvingly at his son's words. David, I'm proud of you for finally standing up for what's right. I learned from the best, David replied, looking at Maria and me. These ladies showed me what real strength looks like. As we prepared to leave the hotel, David asked Maria if he could drive us home. I don't think that's a good idea, Maria said gently. I need some time to process everything that happened today. David looked disappointed but nodded. I understand. Can I call you tomorrow? In a few days, Maria replied. I need some time to think. Of course. Take all the time you need. Roberto offered to drive us home instead, and we accepted gratefully. During the car ride, he apologized over and over for his wife's behavior. Mr. Rodriguez, you don't need to keep apologizing, I finally said. You're not responsible for your wife's choices. But I am responsible for not stopping her sooner, Roberto replied. I knew she could be snobby and judgmental, but I never realized she could be so cruel. I should have protected you and Maria from her. When we arrived at our little house, Roberto walked us to the door. Mrs. Santos, I hope you know that you and Maria will always be welcome in my home. You're family to me, regardless of what happens between David and Maria. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. That means everything to us. After Roberto left, Maria and I sat on our old couch in our little living room, both of us feeling emotionally exhausted. Mama, I can't believe everything that happened today, Maria said, leaning against my shoulder. I know, baby. It feels like we lived through a whole movie. Are you okay? I know this was hard on you too. I thought about her question. You know what? I am okay. Better than okay, actually. Today I learned that we're stronger than I thought we were. How do you mean? We went through the worst thing I could imagine, being lied to, cheated, humiliated, and attacked. But we didn't become bitter or mean. We didn't lose our dignity or our kindness. That makes me proud of who we are. Maria was quiet for a moment. What do you think I should do about David? What does your heart tell you? My heart says I still love him, but my brain says I can't trust him yet. Then listen to both, I advised. Love him, but protect yourself too. Make him prove that he's really changed before you give him your whole heart again. Is that what you would do? I smiled at my daughter. Sweetheart, I raised you to be smarter than me. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. 3 days later, David called Maria just like he had promised. They talked for 2 hours about everything that had happened and what they both wanted for the future. He's different, Mama, Maria told me after the call. He sounds like the David I fell in love with 3 years ago, before his mother started poisoning his mind. What did you tell him? I told him I'd have dinner with him next week. Just dinner, to see if he really is changed. Over the next few months, David did everything he could to prove he was a different man. He got his own apartment, separate from his family's influence. He started volunteering at a homeless shelter. He took Maria on simple dates, walks in the park, dinner at small restaurants, movie nights at her house. Most importantly, he never once complained about his mother being out of his life, or tried to make excuses for her behavior. Roberto filed for divorce 3 weeks after the wedding disaster. He said he realized that after 30 years of marriage, he didn't really know the woman he had married. I thought she was just particular about social status, he told us during one of his visits. I didn't realize she had no capacity for kindness toward people she considered beneath her. 6 months after that terrible wedding day, David proposed to Maria again. But this time was different. He didn't take her to a fancy restaurant. Instead, he came to our little house on a Sunday afternoon when I was making dinner. He sat at our kitchen table and asked for my permission to marry my daughter. Mrs. Santos, he said, I know I don't deserve another chance. But if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life making sure Maria never regrets giving me one. I looked at this young man who had grown up so much in just 6 months. David, do you promise to put Maria first, even when it's difficult? I promise. Do you promise to stand up for her against anyone who tries to hurt her, even if it's your own family? I promise. Do you promise to be honest with her, even when the truth is hard? I promise. I looked at my daughter, who was smiling with tears in her eyes. Then you have my blessing. The wedding we planned this time was completely different. We had it in our little church, with just our closest family and friends. Maria wore a simple white dress that cost $50 instead of $5,000. The flowers were from the grocery store where I worked, arranged by Maria's best friend instead of a fancy florist. Roberto walked Maria down the aisle, since her father had passed away years earlier. Judge Morrison performed the ceremony. The whole thing cost less than $1,000, but it was the most beautiful wedding I had ever seen. Because this time, it was about love instead of showing off. This time, it was about 2 people who had learned that the most important things in life can't be bought with money. During his wedding speech, David said something I'll never forget. A year ago, I thought being a man meant having the most expensive things and impressing the right people. I thought love was something you could plan and control like a business deal. I was wrong about everything. He looked at Maria with such pure love in his eyes. This beautiful woman taught me that being a real man means keeping your word, even when it costs you something. It means choosing love over comfort, truth over convenience, and character over reputation. The small crowd in our little church was completely silent, hanging on every word. Maria could have chosen revenge when I betrayed her. She could have been bitter and mean. Instead, she chose forgiveness and gave me a chance to become the man I should have been all along. That's the kind of person I married, someone who makes everyone around her better just by being herself. David turned to look at me, and Mrs. Santos taught me what real strength looks like. When my family tried to crush her spirit, she stood tall. When they tried to steal her money, she fought back with dignity. When they tried to humiliate her, she responded with grace. I'm honored to call her my mother-in-law. I started crying happy tears, and I wasn't the only one. Even Roberto was wiping his eyes. Most importantly, David continued, both of these amazing women taught me that you can't buy class, you can't purchase integrity, and you can't inherit character. Those things come from inside, and they're worth more than all the money in the world. When David finished his speech, the whole church erupted in applause. But the real celebration was just beginning. We had the reception in the church basement, with food that the church ladies had cooked themselves. There was no fancy DJ, just Roberto playing guitar and singing old love songs in Spanish. There was no expensive photographer, just my sister Carmen taking pictures with her phone. But everyone was smiling, everyone was laughing, and everyone was genuinely happy to be there. It was perfect. During the reception, Roberto pulled me aside for a private conversation. Elena, he said. He had started calling me by my first name after months of visiting our family. I have something I want to give you. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a deed to a small house in a nice neighborhood across town. Roberto, what is this? I asked, confused. It's a wedding gift for Maria and David. But I'm giving it to you because I want you to have the final say in whether they accept it or not. I stared at the deed. You're giving them a house? It's not a big house, and it's not in the fanciest neighborhood. But it's safe, it's clean, and it's theirs with no strings attached. No mortgage, no rent, no conditions. I felt overwhelmed. Roberto, this is too much. We can't accept this. Elena, please. Let me do this. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, and no one to leave it to accept David. Let me help them start their marriage without financial stress. I thought about it carefully. This wasn't like the wedding disaster, where Mrs. Rodriguez had used money to try to control people. This was Roberto genuinely wanting to help his son and new daughter-in-law build a good life together. Are you sure there are no strings attached? I asked. The only condition is that they be happy, Roberto smiled. I made my decision. Then yes, we accept. But on one condition of my own. What's that? You have to let me cook dinner for you, every Sunday. You're family now, and family doesn't eat alone. Roberto's eyes filled with tears. I would be honored. When we told Maria and David about the house, Maria immediately started crying. But this time, they were tears of joy and gratitude instead of pain and betrayal. Papa Roberto, Maria said. She had started calling him Papa after the divorce was finalized. How can we ever thank you? By being happy, Roberto replied simply. By loving each other the way you do right now for the rest of your lives. That's all the thanks I need. As the evening wound down and guests started heading home, I found myself thinking about everything that had happened over the past year. We had gone from the worst day of our lives to one of the best days of our lives. Judge Morrison came over to say goodbye. Elena, I wanted you to know that I've been telling everyone I know about what happened at that first wedding. Your story has inspired a lot of people. What do you mean? I mean, people are talking about how you and Maria handled that situation. How you chose dignity over revenge, forgiveness over bitterness. You've become local heroes without even knowing it. I felt embarrassed. We didn't do anything special, Judge Morrison. We just tried to be decent people in a difficult situation. That's exactly what made it special, he smiled. In a world where everyone wants to get even, you chose to get better instead. After all the guests had gone home, it was just our little family left in the church basement, me, Maria, David, and Roberto. We sat around one of the tables, sharing leftover wedding cake and talking about the future. Mama, Maria said, what do you think the most important lesson from this whole experience was? I thought about her question carefully. So much had happened, and we had all learned so many things. I think the most important lesson is that your character is tested not when things are going well, but when things are falling apart. Anyone can be kind when life is easy. The real test is whether you can stay kind when people are being cruel to you. David nodded thoughtfully. I failed that test the first time. But you passed it the second time. I reminded him. That's what matters. Roberto raised his glass of punch. I'd like to make a toast. We all raised our glasses. To Elena and Maria Santos, Roberto said, who taught an old businessman and his spoiled son that the best things in life aren't things at all. They're the people who love you, the integrity you maintain, and the kindness you show to others. To family, Maria added, both the one you're born into and the one you choose. To second chances, David said, and the people who are brave enough to give them. And to love, I finished, which always wins in the end, even when it doesn't look like it at first. We clinked our glasses together, and I felt a deep sense of peace and happiness. A year ago, I thought the Rodriguez family was going to destroy us. Instead, they helped us discover how strong we really were. Maria and David moved into their new house a month later. I helped them paint the walls and plant a small garden in the backyard. It was a modest house, but it was filled with love and laughter. Roberto kept his promise about Sunday dinners. Every week, he would come to my house, and we would cook together, him sharing recipes from his travels, me teaching him the simple comfort foods my mother had taught me. 6 months after the wedding, we got some unexpected news. Mrs. Rodriguez had moved to another state and married a wealthy older man she had met through her lawyer. Roberto showed us the wedding announcement in the newspaper. "Are you sad?" I asked him. Roberto shook his head. "I'm relieved. I hope she's happy with her new husband. And I hope she's learned to be kinder to people." "Do you think she has?" Maria asked. "I doubt it," Roberto said honestly. "But people can change if they really want to. Look at David." David, who was helping me wash dishes, smiled. I had good teachers. A year after Maria and David's real wedding, they came to me with wonderful news. Maria was pregnant. "Mama," she said, glowing with happiness, "you're going to be a grandmother." I started crying immediately. "Oh, my baby. This is the most wonderful news." David hugged me tight. "Mrs. Santos, I promise you that our children will know their grandmother's strength and kindness. We'll tell them the story of how you stood up to bullies with dignity and grace. And how you taught their father to be a better man," Roberto added. When little Elena Rodriguez Santos was born, yes, they named her after me, I held that tiny baby and thought about all the lessons I wanted to teach her. I wanted to teach her that money doesn't make you important, how you treat people does. I wanted to teach her that when someone shows you their true character, believe them. I wanted to teach her that forgiveness doesn't mean letting people hurt you. It means not letting their actions poison your heart. Most importantly, I wanted to teach her that love always wins, even when it takes longer than you think it should. As I write this story, little Elena is 3 years old, and she's already showing signs of the Santos family's strength and the Rodriguez family intelligence. She's kind to everyone she meets. She stands up for other children who are being picked on, and she has her grandfather Roberto wrapped around her little finger. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret giving David a second chance, or if I wish we had gotten revenge on Mrs. Rodriguez instead of choosing forgiveness. The answer is simple: no. Revenge would have made us bitter and angry. Forgiveness made us stronger and happier. Mrs. Rodriguez took one day from our lives with her cruelty. If we had chosen revenge, we would have given her the rest of our days too. Instead, we chose to build something beautiful from the ashes of her meanness. David became the man he was always meant to be. Maria learned that she was stronger than she ever imagined. Roberto discovered that family is about love, not blood. And I learned that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us to the best things in our lives. The most important lesson of all: your family can't cancel your invitation to happiness. Only you can do that. And we chose to keep our invitation, no matter what anyone else said or did. That, my friends, is how a disaster became a blessing, how enemies became family, and how a wedding that never happened led to the greatest love story I've ever been part of. Sometimes life gives you exactly what you need, even when it looks nothing like what you wanted. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey with Elena, Maria, David, and the Rodriguez family. This story reminds us all that life has a funny way of testing our character when we least expect it. Elena and Maria could have chosen bitterness and revenge, but instead they chose dignity and forgiveness, and look how beautifully everything turned out in the end. The most powerful lesson here? Your worth isn't determined by how much money you have or what social circle you belong to. It's determined by how you treat others, especially when they can't do anything for you in return. Elena proved that a grocery store worker can have more class and character than someone with all the money in the world. Here's what I want you to remember. When people show you who they really are, believe them the first time. But also remember that people can change if they truly want to. Just look at David's transformation. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or made you think about the power of forgiveness and second chances, please hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to me and helps me bring you more uplifting stories like Elena's. And here's my challenge to you. The next time someone treats you unfairly, ask yourself, what would Elena Santos do? Choose dignity over drama, kindness over cruelty, and watch how it changes not just the situation, but who you become as a person. Don't forget to like this story if it moved you. Share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of standing up for yourself with grace, and comment below, I want to hear about a time when you chose forgiveness over revenge, or when someone's kindness changed your perspective. Remember, your invitation to happiness can never be canceled by anyone but you. Keep that invitation, protect it, and use it to build the beautiful life you deserve. Until next time, keep choosing love, keep choosing kindness, and keep believing that every ending can become a new beginning. Subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us what really matters in life.